Hi everyone, Christoph the Polish Geek, and welcome to the review of Gladiator II. I've done two shorts on this movie, before the theater reaction, now the theater reaction, although I'll say this, no, I'm not going to be like those YouTubers that constantly make their before and out of theater reaction to movies. I'll only be doing that on special occasions, like I thought Gladiator II was, and I will certainly do it on Nosferatu, because that's now my most anticipated movie for the rest of the year. But no, I'm not going to turn into one of those YouTubers that just does before and out of theater reactions. I'm not into that stuff. But now let's talk about Gladiator 2, because if you've been watching me, you probably know that the original Gladiator is one of my favorite movies of all time. I gave it the whole you should be watching treatment. It's in the video description. Suggest you check it out. It's one of my favorite videos I've made, and one of my most popular too. But yeah, the original Gladiator is literally one of my favorite movies of all time. And as soon as Gladiator 2 was announced, I was like, wait, am I hearing right? I thought it was just some silly rumors or something, because I always felt that if there ever was a movie that should never ever have a sequel, it's actually Gladiator. The first one told a perfect, complete, standalone story that was complete, and there was no need for more. Because the first Gladiator is one of those few movies I will call pure perfection in every way, shape, or form. Everything in this movie is spectacular, and as I said, I suggest you see my You Should Be Watching video for that. And you'll see further what I think about the first Gladiator movie. But, of course, then I heard that it's actually true, and they really were making the sequel to Gladiator. And then I read some story details, and I thought to myself, okay, I understand, ancient Rome is an excellent period. If Ridley Scott, who I think generally excels at historical epics, even if they aren't fully historically accurate generally, but then I thought if Ridley Scott wanted to just revisit ancient Rome and do a new movie set in ancient Rome, new standalone story, I'll be all for that. That would be a fantastic idea. Let's use a comparison of Kingdom of Heaven and Robin Hood. Kingdom of Heaven, which is my favorite Ridley Scott movie, the director Scott, not the theatrical. And then, of course, Ridley Scott made another medieval movie after the Third Crusade, because Kingdom of Heaven takes place before the Third Crusade, and then he made another medieval movie after the Third Crusade, Robin Hood, with Russell Crowe, which I think is very underrated. I love that movie. But they weren't sequels. They were both their own standalone medieval stories, and it was perfect. So, if Ridley Scott wanted to revisit ancient Rome, why not just make a new standalone story set in ancient Rome? Why make it a sequel to a masterpiece and one of the greatest movies of all time and one of his own best achievements? But we all know this is marketing. So at this point, only one question probably remains when I went to see this movie. Because then I've been hearing some positive reviews about this movie, and people were very much hyping this movie, so I thought, especially that even the trailers didn't actually look bad, they just basically confirmed what I was saying, that why not just make a new standalone story set in ancient Rome. So, now that I've seen the movie, you probably are all wondering one question.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And the answer to that is yes, I was entertained. I'm not going to lie, I was entertained. And there is a lot to love in this movie, but it doesn't change the fact that this movie very much solidified the stance that I took ever since this movie was announced. So first, let's get on with the positives. The set design, the recreation of ancient Rome, the costumes, all of that is spectacular. The recreation of ancient Rome is simply spectacular. As I said, are all the costumes and visuals and all of that is simply fantastic, phenomenal. But at the same time, the first movie already did it, and in general, if you make a movie about ancient Rome with such a high budget and you actually try to make it look good, then most movies set in ancient Rome are bound to look like that. So yes, the recreation of ancient Rome, the set design and all that, this is splendid. But now let's talk about the actual story. And as you probably know, the story is about Lucius, the son of Lucilla and the nephew of Emperor Commodus, who many fans have been for years suspecting that he was actually a son of Maximus. And yes, this movie confirmed that was very much the case, and more specifically, Lucius now lives with his wife somewhere in Africa, and then their city gets invaded by Roman soldiers, and the wife of Lucius gets killed in battle, and then Lucius is on the other hand taken to slavery and then becomes a gladiator, and then he goes to follow in his father's footsteps and overthrow the new two Roman emperors that rule Rome. If that isn't a rehash of the first one, I don't know what is, but at any time something really pretty cool and interesting was happening, you then get your head immediately to the first movie, and remember, first movie already done it, but better. Like, I suggest you watch a review of Jeremy Johns. He couldn't have summarized it better. Like, if you see his review, he would constantly bring up, like, anytime something interesting was happening in a movie, he would constantly have to remind himself how the first movie already has done it, but better. And I'm pretty much very much on the same page as Jeremy Johns. Like, yep, anytime like you saw a similarity to the first movie, you just think to yourself, you've seen it before, but better. And it seems like the movie went to great lengths to make it clear how much a sequel this is, which was the biggest strike against the movie, one of them at least. Like, even some of the shots feels like were outright borrowed from the first movie, or maybe even cut out of it and just inserted into the movie, because yep, this doesn't get more rehash and sequel than that. But that said, when the movie does try to do things on its own accord, its own original things, then I say this is when I say the movie actually succeeds, and where I was actually really enjoying the movie. Like, which means that the last act of the movie was really the best part, because this is literally when it feels like that the movie actually finally tried to do its own story instead of just constantly rehashing a much better movie. So, again, this was the last act, but still, it solidified what I've been constantly saying. Like, why not just make a new standalone story set in ancient Rome? Don't try to make it a sequel to a masterpiece, or worse of all, even constantly rehash it and just keep reminding the audience that it's nothing more than a legacy sequel to a much better movie. I also have to talk about the characters. Like, one of the biggest problems also of the movie was that, in all honesty, Lucius, played by Paul Mescal, he so much felt like a Maximus ripoff. Like, for me at least, he didn't really feel like a character of his own. Like, hard to say, but for some reason, like, as I was watching the movie, anytime he was on screen, which is most of the movie, I was just constantly reminding myself about his father Maximus. Yep, Lucius very much felt like a ripoff of Maximus, not really much of his own character. But there were actually characters that were actually more interesting, like his mother Lucilla, played again by Connie Nielsen wonderfully. So the return of Connie Nielsen was welcome as Lucilla. Like, she was certainly a much more, I think, interesting character than her son. And then again, she's like one of those characters that came over from the first movie, so that's a given. And I'm glad they respect her character. It totally felt like that, the same Lucilla that we knew from the first movie. And another character that was interesting, although really evil too, but really interesting, was Macrinus, played wonderfully by Denzel Washington. In my trailer reaction, I was saying that I wasn't sure if that Denzel Washington should play that type of character, but I was wrong, because he played like an owner of the Gladiator stables who provides arms to European armies. So yes, I actually think that Denzel Washington was perfect pick for the role. And I think that he was actually one of the most interesting characters in the movie. And then there are also the twin emperors, but who I have to say, I already seen it in the trailer how cartoony they are. But can't complain about them because, like, that's kind of the point actually, that they were like those psychopathic men children, kind of in the style of Nero, who lived before them, but yeah, because I was afraid they were going to be like those cartoony kids villains, but at the same time, no. I actually say they were pretty well done. I mean, they certainly were psychopathic men children, but I understand that was kind of the point, that, well, they were very much sadistic, but at the same time they were so immature and incompetent that they were really being manipulated by Macrinus, and I really like that part of the story. And it goes kind of to the point I've been constantly saying. When the movie wasn't trying to rehash an original and instead trying to be its own new story set in ancient Rome, that's when the movie, I think, worked best for me. And it very much further solidified what I've constantly been saying ever since this movie was announced, and even more so when the trailers were released. Like, why does it have to be a sequel to a masterpiece? Why not just create a new original story in ancient Rome? Like, if you did it, I would say this could end up being a really wonderful movie. Again, it would be an entirely different movie though, because, as I said, most of the movie sadly though is rehashing original and just constantly reminding yourself how much better the original is. And also I'll have to talk a little bit about the fight scenes. The fight scenes in the movie were actually pretty decent, and I overall really enjoyed most of them. Although I have to disagree when I've been hearing some people saying that it's even more bloody and over the top than the original when it comes to fights. Nope, I disagree with that. I actually think original is actually more violent, I say. But then again, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, the fight scenes were actually pretty decent. Like, when I seen the trailer, I was actually looking forward to seeing the fight in the Colosseum on the Gladiator and the Rhino, and then water in the Colosseum, which was one of my most anticipated moments. And yes, I'll give a credit to those. Those were actually pretty good and decent, and I really enjoyed them. But overall, you probably are now wondering what I've been wondering actually. Was the movie really that good as the media is overhyping it? Is it really best Ridley Scott's movie in a while? Or have standards for Hollywood simply have lowered? And my conclusion is, as I said, when the movie wasn't trying to rehash the original and instead tried to be its own thing, that's when the movie, I say, was actually really good. Maybe even I could go as far as to say great, even if those moments are far in the few. But ultimately, I have to say standards have in fact very much lowered for Hollywood, because the best way to check if standards have lowered or if the movie really is great is imagine if the movie came out back in 2012 and compare it to everything that came out around then. In fact, I will use my two personal favorite movies of this decade, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio and The Northman. They're my favorite go-to examples whether to check if the movie really is great or just standards have lowered. And the answer is, for those two movies at least, yes, they generally are really great, amazing movies, because if they came out back in 2012, I still very much would consider both of those movies fantastic. But I don't think I can say the same thing for Gladiator II. And when say best Ridley Scott movie in a while, well, yeah, but Ridley Scott hasn't done a great movie in a long time. Like, The Last Duel was decent, I enjoyed that one, and Napoleon, I was far more positive and forgiving of it than vast majority of people seem to be, and I even was very hopeful director Scott would fix all the issues, but from what I'm hearing, apparently it's actually even worse. So yeah, Gladiator II being a best Ridley Scott movie in a while doesn't say much, because even if Ridley Scott directed some of my favorite movies of all time in the past, like the first Gladiator of course, and director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven, then again, he hasn't really done a great movie in a long while. So Gladiator II being better than his most recent movies, you can't really say it tells you much, really. So, in conclusion, I say Gladiator 2 is great when it tries to be its own thing. Problem is, most of the time, it's just trying to rehash a much better movie, and I think Jeremy Jahns said it best. So, thank you guys for checking out this video. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you later, bye.